Nole Insiders, Lane Hurt, Tim Linnefeld, live with you guys on Facebook, high above Doak Campbell Stadium in the press box. Scrimmage number 2 in the books, final scrimmage of the spring. Make sure if you have any questions, we may be able to get to a couple of them. Comment on the Facebook page. Tim, Jimbo wasn't exactly happy. He wasn't upset, but not the happiest. Maybe a product of 15 straight days of practice for the Noles.
Could be. Phrase he used afterwards, not bad, but not good enough, which I think at this stage of practice, still in the middle of fall camp, nearing the end as we inch closer to the weekend, and then game week next week, which is always sort of a weird in-between fall camp game week practice, especially with a game on Monday. Still kind of in the dog days, so to speak, so I'm not surprised that he wasn't over the moon. I think a lot of guys are just sort of grinding through the last few days of camp. You mentioned that on Monday. It's just right now it's almost an endurance test to see who can keep dealing with the heat, who can keep dealing with the physical nature of the practices, and find that mental toughness, which has really been sort of a theme of fall camp. So not bad, not good enough. The good news is there's still time to get it right.
Tried to parse some of Jimbo's statements after practice. Wide receivers have been a hot topic. Last week it was Nyquan Murray was the guy who earned a lot of praise. Today it was Devontae Phillips. Said he's a big, strong guy. Made some really impressive plays in today's scrimmage. That bodes well. As Jimbo also said, it's good to have options, not just bodies at wide receiver. And it seems like some of those options are coming to the forefront.
Well, to touch on that first, we talk so much about depth at a certain position, but he said in so many words, well, depth doesn't do you any good if they can't all play, but it sounds like in this particular instance they can. And Devontae Phillips, I think, that's a really pleasant surprise. I mean, here's a guy who was fairly highly recruited out of high school, came from Miami Central, the same school as Dalvin Cook, obviously some top-flight high school football in Miami, but dealt with a groin injury last year, didn't contribute much, and then injured his knee on the first day of fall camp, and you're thinking, oh gosh, is this kid snake bit at least early on, and will it be anytime soon before we can see him make an impact? And obviously the season hasn't started yet. But the fact that he's out there making plays, asserting himself in that offense, and just kind of showing what he can do, even just a couple weeks after suffering what I guess turned out to be a mild knee injury, is definitely a positive sign.
To the defensive side, defensive line has looked good. Jimbo talked about Derek Nottie, and he's been really disruptive at times. Had a good scrimmage, I guess, have done some things. But he's not the only guy. He's talked about DeMarcus Walker, Josh Sweat, a young guy, Brian Burns, at times have taken turns really kind of dominating and disrupting things. If you ask me, I think the defensive line is going to be a real strength this year for this team. A lot of depth now with some of these young guys stepping up. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's really great to hear that about Derek Nottie, who I think when Florida State signed him a couple years ago, you're thinking about him as a potential Timmy Jernigan type of player. And it takes a little while to go into that, and those expectations probably weren't really fair when you're talking about a guy who probably should have been a first-round pick, slipped into the second. And so to come in, a year after Timmy Jernigan leaves like Derek Nottie did, and sort of have those expectations placed upon you, that's kind of tough. But it sounds like he really has come into his own this fall camp. Jimbo said today that he's so disruptive that it's messing with practice. The offense can't practice the way they want to because he's getting in the backfield on every single play. And you've seen that, I think, a little bit in talking to Jimbo Fisher and some teammates. Brian Burns is a guy that they're really, really impressed with. When you look at him on the field, he just has a really, really impressive frame. He's really big, really tall, but also super fast off the line. From what we could tell, some offensive linemen are having their hands full with Brian Burns, another South Florida guy. So maybe not a surprise that he's able to come in and do well. So yeah, it's you don't want to overreact too much to preseason, but at the same time, if you look at some of those young guys, some of the freshmen that have started in this camp, I think they're really pleased with their first-year guys so far. I know that seems to come out every year that they're pleased with the freshmen and they have high expectations, but given the way Florida State recruited this year, the signing class was number 1 in the country, given some of the top-end talent they had between a player like Brian Burns, a player like Levante Taylor, who, by the way, missed today's scrimmage with I think he said a thigh bruise.
Injury.
Right. I don't know that it should be a surprise that some of the freshmen are coming in and looking right at home.
Well, we have one question for you guys. What do we got?
How's Rick Leonard doing?
I think he looks really good. He's another one of those guys that I think, when we mentioned Brian Burns and Josh Sweat, sometimes you have your hands full with those guys. But Jimbo was asked today, is he kind of settled into that starting right tackle spot? He kind of came out and said it. Yeah, he is. I said he just offered the caveat. He still has a few things to work on, but as of right now, he's kind of taken charge. And what I think is really impressive, beat out some more experienced players there between Brock Rubel, Derek Kelly. Those guys seem like they're battling for second right now behind Rick Leonard.
Yeah, my point with Rick Leonard is he's a guy who last year, as a defensive guy, was one of the MVPs of the spring, made the move to offensive line, and has not missed a beat. He must work incredibly hard, must be one of the hardest working guys out there, and to possibly be the starting right tackle for the Seminoles is really impressive. It says a lot about just how hard of a worker he is.
Certainly worked hard in the weight room. He's put on 30 pounds, and you can really tell. And one other point to make on that is that when Rick Leonard made the switch to the offensive line in the spring, we kind of wondered, well, where are the defensive ends going to come from? Well, now we're seeing they're coming in the form of Josh Sweat and Brian Burns and Janarius Robinson, who got some action out there today. Jacob Pugh, who looks healthy and is getting more involved. So, what kind of was a puzzle, I guess, a few months ago. You wondered where these pass rushers are going to come from. Now, all of a sudden, you have a new starting right tackle and edge rushers that you just look loaded for bear there. So, really, it so far has worked out really well for Florida State.
Well, there you have it, Seminole fans. Our first Facebook Live post, hopefully it went pretty well. We're going to see a lot more of this on Facebook this year. I think we're going to try to get out there on Tuesdays before practice, so maybe get used to seeing us around 3:15, 3:30 on Tuesdays. Get your questions in. We'll try to answer some of those.